Hello, good people, and welcome to the Lunch Date with Sharia Farmer. I am going on week number 3 for domestic violence awareness. This year, we started with emotional abuse. If you missed the last 2 videos, we went over warning signs, um, warning signs around how to identify emotional abuse. And as I promised in the first video, what we were going to do for the last 2 weeks is we're going to do sort of a checklist for unhealthy versus healthy relationships. And then we're going to end the month with actual self-care tips for all of those who may have currently experiencing, and or just needs to know some supportive ways to take care of yourself as an individual so that you can be a healthy individual in a relationship. So with that being said, we're going to get started because I have been trying to get the videos down to a shorter length so that people can watch it and get the information and really grow from it without it having to be a long conversation. So let's get right into a checklist. So let's start off with unhealthy, and it's going to sound very similar to the last 2 weeks just to give you a summary, but it'll also give you a little bit more ways to identify unhealthy behaviors that might happen within a relationship or an unhealthy relationship. So for our unhealthy list, and if I'm speaking too fast, please go back, make sure you listen to them specifically for your situation. And in some cases, as we learn to grow, we can actually help others to identify these things in their own relationships. So again, we're going to start with unhealthy, and I'd like to end on a positive, which is a healthy relationship. So for unhealthy, when we think of the person that we're spending time with or in a relationship with, they get extremely jealous or accuse you of cheating, and they put you down, call you names, cursing or making you feel bad about yourself, or even bad about who you want to be in terms of if you're growing, yells at you, threatens you, or treats you like a child in a lot of cases. Doesn't take what you have to say seriously, belittles your thoughts and your thinking and your sense of being, just sort of never takes you seriously. You don't have a voice in your conversations. You seem to always be the one listening, always the one accused of doing something wrong or being wrong in the relationship. So you're frequently criticized by this person or by what the person feels you're not doing correctly. So again, going back to what we talked about in the first few weeks, the whole right or wrong concept, or the concept that you're never right in the relationship, so they have to teach you how to be healthy, has threatened to hurt you and others. Right. So a lot of times when we think about domestic violence, we always constantly think about the individual threatening their partner or their intimate partner. But sometimes the threat can be, especially depending on age, can be related to their parents, can be related to their friends, can be related to a number of people that they will threaten to hurt if they ever found out what was going on in the relationship. Cheats or threatens to cheat. So they cheat constantly, and then they make the excuse that you're the reason they have to cheat, or you're not woman enough or man enough to please them, so they have to go outside of the relationship. So they again make their negative behaviors your fault. They tell you things like how to dress, how to do your hair, how to look right or look presentable to the world, or and in a way that is about criticizing you, not in a way that says, I enjoy when you wear this outfit or that outfit. It's in a way that says, you don't know how to dress as a woman, or you don't know how to dress as a man, and so I have to teach you. So once again, this person is somewhat belittling you or making you feel bad about who you are or who you're growing to be. Blames others for their behaviors. So they're constantly looking at, I'm only mad because you did this, this, and that. If you didn't act like your mother, I wouldn't do these things to you. Like, again, using manipulation to basically reward their behavior or say that their behavior is acceptable, regardless of if it's harmful or hurtful to another person. They may not physically hit you, but they do things like grab you, and I think grab or push, to me, they're still physical, but in some cases people don't identify those as physical abuse. So I'd be really mindful of the amount of contact that the person uses to be aggressive towards you and also to be controlling over you. smashes or destroys things. So if they're not hitting you, they're hitting something, they're hitting the wall, they're telling you and explaining to you that you get me so angry that I don't know how to control this anymore. And so they're almost preparing you possibly for the possibility of hitting you at a later time. Excuse me. They embarrass you in front of your friends. They try to humiliate you. So if you're an outgoing personality, they are constantly trying to bring you down or trying to stop you from talking or being cheerful with other people. So one of the hardest things for a person who is like extremely an extrovert or outgoing is that when their spouse is not that way, being able to balance how much you give to their spouse and how much you give to the world. However, if your spouse is actively trying to prevent you from being who they know you are, which is a funny person, or a very relaxed personality who has a lot of friends, and they're telling you that you no longer can be around any female friends if they're a female. You can no longer talk to this or that person because I know that they take what you're doing as liking them. What they're indicating is that they don't trust you, when in regards to the relationships, this is who your personality was even before they came into your life. So be very mindful of them trying to stifle your personality and trying to stifle the relationships that you have. And again, that goes back to the concept of control and also needing to be the only thing that your attention is averted to. So it's almost like no one else can have you but them, that kind of concept. Tries to keep the other person from having a job or getting further education. So depending on what level of your life you're in or trying to accomplish things in your life, this person will try to prevent you from doing more outside of them, because they also need to be able to control things like your finances, how much you bring into the home. So they almost need you to need them. And although that sounds like, oh, well, aren't we partners? Shouldn't we want better for each other? That would be the case if it was a healthy relationship. But if I'm trying to control someone, I also need to be able to control them financially, in terms spiritually. I can control them in multiple different ways to be able to get them to do or be who I want them to be in the relationships. They tend to make all the decisions in the relationship. And what I mean is that you no longer have a voice in what you do, who you see. So all of a sudden you're doing things like moving from one state to another where you have absolutely no family, no friends, and your partner may have one person that they know in that area, but what they didn't do was identify how the lack of support would harm you as an individual in terms of just keeping your personality. So they're almost isolating you from your support system so that you have to, again, rely on them. Goes back to their promises. So things like, I'll never hurt you again. I didn't mean to hurt you. What I'll do is I'll try again, or I'll try my best next time not to do such and this or that. And then what really happens is that, again, the violence escalates or the emotional abuse escalates. And you go from, I'm never going to call you a name again, to being called every name in the book and them apologizing. So they constantly break the promise of getting healthier or doing healthier things in the relationship. And I want people to understand that each person is going to listen to these based off of the relationship they're in or have been in, and be able to look at the example and how it relates to their healthiness or not. Not every example is got to be checked for it to be an unhealthy relationship. So I didn't make that point earlier. And I'm also not going to exhaust the list of things that could be unhealthy. But these are just ways for you to recognize, and almost us summarizing some of the things that we learned over the last 2 weeks. They use alcohol and drugs as an excuse for their hurtful behavior. So in the first week, I talked about the reality of excuses and anger being the reason that they're abusive. And the reality is that although we would like to believe that that's the case, most domestic violence is not related to the issue of anger. It's related to the issue of control. And so when we think about anger, and we talked about the characteristics of excuse me, I did that in the live version, but we talked about the characteristics of an abuser, and one of the characteristics that we recognize is that they usually are very charismatic or charming, and sometimes people are caught off guard or surprised when they find out that this person was abusive or hurt someone that they loved. So it's very important that we can't don't allow for excuses like I was drunk or I was high, and so that's the only reason I did it and I'll never do it again. But then the next week you're not only getting drunk and high again, but you're constantly trying to control that person. They ignore or withdraw affection from you. So they almost use affection as a punishment. So what they do is, if they, again, going back to the example where you're an extrovert and maybe possibly your abuser or batterer isn't, they actually will do things like, if you continue that, I'm not going to like love on you or kiss and hug you or have sex with you. I'm not going to do the things that would be my part in the relationship, in order to kind of control, again, how you interact with other people. So what I'll do is I'll openly move away from you in public. I'll act like I'm mad or have a attitude with you, so that way you can bring your attention to me, and no longer am I going to give you the affection that you need. I'm just needing you to, again, comfort me and make me feel okay. When in reality, in doing that, what I just did was take you away from your personality. What I just did was manipulate you into thinking that if we're going to have a healthy relationship, you have to do these things with me as a partner. And what you can't do is withdraw from your own personality to benefit someone else in a relationship, to the point that you're no longer who you are, and to the point that it makes you unhappy. So we have to be really mindful that although it may not be a physical attempt of abuse, emotional abuse can be extremely internalized and also very isolating, and making you feel that they are dependent on you or you're dependent on them. And lastly, one of the things that we kind of were just talking about is, depends completely on the other person to meet their social or emotional needs. So when it comes to emotional abuse and other forms of abuse, that person is constantly trying to get you to see that you're responsible for them emotionally. So if they are sad or hurt, you have to stop everything that you're doing, regardless of what that means or the consequences of that in your life, to be able to appease or take care of them. And so what I want us to do is remember that although that was a summary of an unhealthy relationship, does not exhaust all the possibilities of abuse and types of emotional abuse. So if you didn't check out the last two videos, go back and look at them. I have some other examples and points specifically around emotional abuse that would be helpful if some of those examples didn't make sense for you. So let's end on a positive note. So the reality is that domestic violence, emotional abuse, different types of abuse, has the sense of us not knowing what's healthy or unhealthy. And so what I wanted to do is to kind of go over what is healthy in a relationship. And again, just like the unhealthy list, I'm not going to exhaust all of the points. What I'm trying to do is just give you an idea of what healthiness looks like and what it could look like in a very healthy relationship. So get your checklist out, go back and rewind, do whatever you need to be able to listen to these in a way that's saying, I need to identify what's unhealthy in my relationship and change it, or I need to be out of this relationship if it's totally unhealthy for me. All right, so let's talk about healthy. Has fun together. So they enjoy each other's company, they enjoy being around each other. That seems so simple, right? Because wouldn't all relationships, or possibly shouldn't all relationships, enjoy being, the two partners enjoy being around each other? But let's think about emotional abuse or physical abuse. Would you want to constantly be around someone who physically or emotionally abuse you? The answer usually is no, even though you constantly go back and forth. Partly that is because you're now being controlled, or you believe that something could happen to you. And so you don't have fun. You're actually required to be around the person, which is totally different than enjoying your partner and the two of you having your personalities and enjoying each other. Each enjoys spending separate times with their individual friends or family, and there's nothing wrong with that. So we have friends outside of each other, although we also might have friends together. And the time that I spend with my friends doesn't hinder the time that I spend with my partner or my intimate partner. So the reality is that you actually celebrate the person having healthy relationships outside of you. And in some cases, because I'm going to caution this with everyone has their own belief in this next one, but that person doesn't matter the gender. So I always tell everyone that my husband and I both have friends who are opposite sex, and we've had them for a long time, and both of us continue those relationships after we started dating and even into our marriage, because those relationships are valuable and healthy. So being able to know that regardless of the gender, the partnership, or past history with the person, we trust each other and we trust the friends that we have because of our history. So being able to enjoy spending time separately and having your own identity outside of your husband or your spouse. So in my case, the reality is that there's certain things that I love to do that he's not entertained with or even thinks that's fun. So I wouldn't expect him to come to a Zumba class with me, because my husband would laugh at me if I asked. But the reality is that that doesn't mean he doesn't love me, because he doesn't want to spend time doing one element or one thing that I enjoy doing on my own. And also, it's also some me time when I go do certain things. Always feel safe with each other, right? So you feel protected, you feel taken care of, you feel like you won't be humiliated or embarrassed. You're not ashamed of who you are with your partner, and they don't make you feel bad for who you are, even if you're different in certain areas or way. You're faithful to each other if you made that as the commitment, right? So I'm clearing that up, because if you guys have an open relationship and you're aware of that, who am I to challenge that or question that? But it just needs to be something that's communicated, that both partners are aware, and that both partners have a sense of what commitment means to each other. They support your individual goals in life, college, jobs, dreams. So they're just as excited as you when you're graduating, when you're getting the new job, or you're trying out a new dream, or you're taking the risk to be an entrepreneur versus an employee. So they're just as excited about your goals and your sense of being as you are. And so you're and in reverse. And I hope that we all get that what you're giving in a relationship is also as important as what you're getting. So the same way you would have the expectation that they're supportive of your goals, you should be supportive of theirs. You respect each other's opinions. So even though there's areas that my husband and I disagree in, we are very clear that it doesn't mean that you're stupid or you're ignorant. It doesn't mean that. It just means that we have a different viewpoint on sometimes the same subject. And our viewpoints doesn't indicate that we need to separate because we have a difference of opinion. We both respect each other's opinion based off of knowing and growing together. We solve conflicts without putting each other down. So I really have a hard time when I hear people calling each other names in relationships, because it doesn't make sense to me. However, it's something that has always been a standard within my relationships in general. However, but in terms of friendships, intimate partners. So when you fight fair, and you fight with kindness versus fighting to hurt or harm the other person. So putting them down, calling them a B or a loser, or calling them names, or a deadbeat, calling them the names that you can't take back, even if you say I'm sorry or apologize. So being very mindful that there's no need to threaten, curse, or put people down within a relationship for you to get your point across or to have a healthy conversation. Both accepts responsibility for their own actions. So in any good argument or disagreement, we are both responsible. So when we do things, we apologize. If we harm the person, if we hurt the person's feelings, we apologize to one another, and we determine what it takes to alleviate that offense. So when people, and I'm not going to get too much into forgiveness, people think that the word I'm sorry is all, or I apologize is all that it takes for a person to accept or to understand that they didn't mean to do it. But the reality is, what are you willing to do to alleviate any of the offense that you've done? So what actions are you willing to take to say that I won't do that again, right? So I may have to say, not only do I apologize, but it was wrong of me, and when I do this again, I want you to call me on it because it wasn't my intent. So that way you communicate what's needed to be able to support the other person in the situation in terms of being harmed. You have equal decision-making power. So I was watching a commercial or something when they were making the joke about asking someone what they want for dinner and how difficult that question becomes in a relationship. And I laugh because my husband and I have different food taste and eating different types of things that we would eat. So a lot of times when we're trying to make a decision on what to go get to eat, it becomes really important that he hears me out, because I might not have anything on the menu that I can eat, or vice versa. He may be like, I can't eat anything here. And so we want to make sure that we have equal power or equal decision making power when it comes to things that affect our relationship. And I use that example just as the easiest example, because you might have differences of what you eat, but it doesn't mean you can't come to a compromise or a decision that benefits both of you. Each of you control your own money. So everybody is different when it comes to relationships about how they look at money and how they identify the importance of budgets and structuring budgets. But one of the things that this point makes is not that you can't have separate accounts or have joint accounts. The point is that each party has some level of awareness about where the money is going, how much money is coming in, how much is one person's versus another, and how it benefits the relationship and your family. So making sure that everyone is clear about where money is going is very different than someone having no access to the money, having no access to where their income or how much a person makes, how much they're putting in or taking out from the person. So being able to say that each partner has control of money, that respects or values what you believe as a couple, but also everyone's aware and communicates what that means. And again, that goes back to communication. So that would be a whole nother list of healthiness and how to be healthy within communication. And I'm trying to keep this as short as possible, which I'm noticing it went over the time I wanted. So I'm going to try to speed up here. Control of money, proud of each other, going back to celebrating each other's goals, encouraging each other's interests. So being excited. And so when my husband and I came together, we both had sports that we weren't the biggest fans of, and we actually decided that we would want the person who was the huge fan, we would become fans with that same team together. So for baseball, now I'm a Yankees fan, and for football, Teef has always had a little bit of Giants in him, but now he's really official. And that's because if you know me, how much I love my team, I'm always going to be very clear that I'm a Giants fan, and now my family is too. Have some privacy, being okay with not checking people's phones, not checking people's voicemails, knowing that you have a level of trust with the person that is in the relationship with you. Now, this might change or be different if there was a breach in the trust in the relationship, and that is not what we're talking about, but we're just talking about the foundation of a healthy relationship. So in the case where you have no reason to have someone check your mail, or your voicemail, or check your messages on your phone, or just stroll through your phone, the reality is that it's okay to have privacy within your relationship, and it's my job to determine if I trust my partner or not, and then to communicate what my needs are based off of that trust level, and or where the trust may have been broken. So being able to accept that we all have a need for some level of privacy. Again, having our own relationships, so friends and family being extremely important. So the good thing is that usually in relationships or friendships, you kind of intertwine your relationships and your friendships with friends and family, and hopefully you both benefit from that. But in the cases where you are not allowed to see your friends or your family, you have to be really cautious as to how healthy is that, because they're taking away your support system, and it becomes extremely important for all of us to have our individuality within a relationship. Communicate about sex if your relationship is sexual, making sure that both partners don't feel pressured into having or doing anything sexually that they are uncomfortable with. So I'm going to be talking about consent and the reality of consent with young ladies tomorrow actually, and the importance of being in control of your body, being okay with saying no, being okay with saying that something makes you uncomfortable and this is as far as you would like to go, and being able to do this in a way that is respectful to yourself and to the other person. Now, once I make it clear what my boundaries are and what my boundaries are in the area of sex, then it's also okay for me to say that you've offended me and I no longer want to be in any relationship with you. And in the case of assault or sex or sexual assault, it becomes extremely important for you to determine what you would like to do next in an unhealthy relationship. Or even if you have a history with the person, one of the things that I would hope that everyone knows is that every single encounter is about if I consent or not. And so if I've had sexual relationship with you in the past, that does not mean that I automatically want to do this any longer. And so being able to say no at any point in a relationship and or even within the consideration within the act. So being able to say no at any point and also being respected enough for you having ownership over your own body, that no can change at a later time, but it means right now no is no. So anyway, but that's me going into consent discussion. So, and lastly, well, I think we kind of made this point, giving each other space and knowing what kind of space they need. And I don't know if I made it fully, but being okay with having separate friends, but also having me time. Maybe you don't need to be with your friends or him or her. You just want to spend time with yourself and enjoy your own company. And your partner or your intimate partner should be okay with that, because they also sometimes require space. And space doesn't indicate that a person doesn't want to be with you or doesn't love you. It may just mean that they enjoy their own company as well, and they need some time to play video games, to catch up on their soaps, watch some basketball. They may just go get their nails and toes done. They need some time that's just about them. And then finally, I think this one, although we did not include every single thing that makes a relationship healthy, I think that this ultimately is one of the most important things in any relationship outside of communication, is respect. Respecting each other and treating each other with a level of respect that says, I value you. I hope that you value me, and I hope that together we can be great, but apart and individually we are great as well. And so I hope that both the unhealthy and the healthy checklist will give you an opportunity to kind of run through it in your mind as to how my current relationship is, how my past relationships were, and or if I can support someone in my life who needs to hear or even think differently about relationships. I hope that everyone is well. Next week we will talk about some self-care. I will probably do a little bit of a summary of what we went over the last 3 weeks at this point, and I hope you guys have gotten some information for yourself or someone that you care about. Remember that space and love requires that we take care of ourselves and the people that we care about. And so I really want us to continue to look at our emotional health and our well-being as also taking care of others. So again, I will see you guys next week to be for our closing of the Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and specifically for emotional abuse and some warning signs last 2 weeks. This week, healthy and unhealthy relationships. And then next week, we're going to talk self-care. All right, you guys be well.